In this country right now, 300,000 minors. We have no idea where they are.
Oh, that is nonsense.
That is not nonsense.
No, it is. They are not lost. They're released to their sponsors who have to go through background checks. You have no idea what you're talking about.
They don't.
You think 300,000 minors are lost in America? Are you crazy?
I'm saying that. Why, hello there. I'm Ben Shapiro, and I'm co-founder of The Daily Wire and host of The Ben Shapiro Show. And today, I'm surrounded by 25 Kamala Harris supporters. My first claim is Kamala Harris's attempts to put DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of her policies is destructive. How's it going, dude?
Morning. Josh.
Where'd I get one of those hats?
Oh, my boy made it for me.
Nice.
So, first of all, we're standing on stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is
Are you moving anytime
indigenous
soon?
land. No, but
Why?
the fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking
Yeah, but
about
it's stolen land, so why don't you
diversity,
give it back?
equity, and vision. We should.
So why don't
We
you?
absolutely
You
should.
could do it today, right now.
Great.
So
We
do it.
should, but that's not my point here. The point is you're saying that diversity, equity, inclusion is destructive.
Yes.
Right. So when we look at this country that is built off the backs of slavery and white supremacy, taking the lead, building the roots and foundations of everything that you know and believe today, it's ironic to see a Black and Indian woman who's rising up to the occasion against society, pushing them down. And this isn't just the fact that they're Black and Indian and a woman, it's the fact that
Can you give me an
those
example of how society
demographics-
pushed Kamala Harris down, please?
the demographic of people is what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, but you suggested that Kamala Harris is being pushed down by society.
I'm not suggesting that, no.
I mean, that's
So
Okay,
my
boss,
point is saying
I'm
that
sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
good to meet you. Whoa. Man.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you. So my opening question to you would be, why is that a destructive thing? Why is that a bad thing when for a long time in this country, I feel personally that white men have had an advantage over some communities that have been discriminated against. So why would you say that that is a destructive thing and not, maybe making up for lost time?
Sure. So let me explain what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the basic theory of diversity, equity, and inclusion is spelled out by people like Richard Delgado, who's sort of one of the founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated differences within individuals within that group. And that to me is a failure of logic. It also is destructive in that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together or forming policy that is the best for all Americans.
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say, economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all? The diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups, that history does not fall on everybody equivalent, that frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall on an individual level, right? You and I, we don't look the same. We might have different heights. We might have different qualities. That is just the way that God or nature has bestowed skill sets on everybody. What exactly is the government supposed to correct for? And if you took this entire group and you separated it in half, just draw a line anywhere. It's a circle, right? Anywhere you draw a line, you're going to get disparities between the two groups on either side of the line without regard to race, without regard to sex, and without regard to, for example, sexual
But does
orientation.
that mean that that hasn't played an effect in that story at all?
I'm not going
whatsoever?
to, no, you'd be a fool to claim that, that, again, past injustices have no effect on what's happened today. Thanks so much. Watching guys gear up to run is really entertaining. That was so nice, everybody. Thank you.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you say contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the amount of hours that kids of particular culture study. So, for example, Korean Americans study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents. This is true, by the way, between white people. Okay, so when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values with regard to studying than there are for, say, upper-class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural differences are not just racial differences. I think that anybody who attempts to sort of clumsily map that on and pretend that that's all the same, that's obviously not true. But cultural differences do explain an enormous amount of group disparities across incomes. To take a perfect example, if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. Those are going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just it was a rough way of saying how people act within a group on a large scale. And that is going to amount to some generalization, but that generalization is going to tend to, shall we say, concur. It's going to correlate very highly with outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that these historical disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture in which they're unable to put themselves ahead? You do say that Asian Americans are more likely to study, yes, but we have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations which allowed them into the country. And in order for them, they were given visas, which allowed them to come into they were given easier processes into visas, which allowed them into, no, it's a form of reparations, which they were once excluded from coming in. And so giving them an easier opportunity to attain these visas allowed them into the US. And mainly the individuals who were able to attain those were people with higher educations, which is why it may seem that Asian Americans within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher educational backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans. But what we have to take into account is that Latin America and Hispanic people have faced a lot of tremendous setback due to historical atrocities. It's not their culture per se. What you see within...
Is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic circumstance?
Everything is based off of history. Everything acclimates. Everything is an accumulation of history.
So to take the single motherhood example, for example...
The way...
That was fun anyway. Whoa. Hey, how's it going? How are you? Good to meet you.
So your basis is saying that culturally, people don't have the same advantages, right?
I'm saying that not every culture sort of initiates the same action within groups.
So in part, you're saying that you're part of each culture. You know what goes on in each culture to say these things.
No, I'm saying that I can analyze the activities of a particular group with reference to their actual behavior.
So if you go into my culture, we're told that we can achieve anything through hard work. We have to work 10 times harder. But you're not part of our culture, so you're explaining something that doesn't have to do with you. But in turn, you're saying that that culture, unfortunately, does not value the same thing that the next culture does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perception. So revealed preference is how people act in the world. So for example, if you have one group of people who say, we really, really value our kids studying, and then their kids don't study at all, that would be a revealed preference.
Okay.
Everybody has
so then when you have people who say in corporate America, you have people who value nepotism versus actual studying hard. What is that called then?
Okay, so the idea that people generally value nepotism over studying hard, I'd like to see the evidence of that, given the fact the vast majority of wealth in this country is not created through nepotism or through inherited wealth.
But Donald Trump was given nepotism, was he not?
I mean, he's one example among a bajillion people who are very, very wealthy in this country. I'm very wealthy now. I certainly wasn't born very wealthy.
But then you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience, can you not?
That just happens to be the case. Okay, I mean, you can laugh at my particular history, but I grew up in an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, California, with 4 siblings in 1 bedroom.
In Burbank, Hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
In Burbank, I'm sorry, but in Burbank versus growing up in South Central, being told that you have to excel 10 times harder than the next person, but then you're not part of the culture, to say that you can actually come to these disparities is kind of farsighted.
The idea that you have to work 10 times harder coming from South Central based on, for example, test score is obviously not true. We've had affirmative action programs in this country for solidly 40
But now
years.
affirmative action is gone. It's out the door.
Thank
Now
God, it was a bad
DEI is
program.
present. DEI is actually saying that we need to have diversity, equity, inclusion. So you're actually putting a footing in the door for different races, different genders, different women, different men, everything. So now you're saying that because this program is gone, this one isn't.
Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Yeah, like a jackrabbit. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Hi,
how's it going?
Naima.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So, I kind of want to shift the conversation about DEI a little bit away from culture because I don't know if that's necessarily like a helpful conversation to have. And I really want to talk more about representation. So 1 in 5 Americans currently is Hispanic. This country, like it or not, is not a homogenous country. We are a very diverse country. Do you not think that our legislators should be representative of the overall population?
I don't see a way that you can have a quote unquote representative legislature with 435 members of Congress in a country of 340 million people because you can divvy that up however you want. It's not by race. You could do it by sex. You could do it by gender. You could do it by sexual orientation. How exactly do you decide what is quote unquote the representative group? And also, I don't believe that individuals ought to be represented based on group identity. So, for example, I'm Jewish. Jews are actually overrepresented in Congress. I don't think that we ought to decide exactly how many people in Congress are Jewish based on the Jewish population of the country. I think that's actually a pretty silly way to do representation.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally, there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not represented.
I mean,
We have
that's not true.
never
We
had a
vote.
black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had a
The
Jewish
whole
president. Who
concept is
cares?
no taxation without. Well, we have had a white male president. We've had like 45 of them.
Whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for
You do.
quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
So, I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development. Okay, so
Basically, everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism
Do
is
you
also
not
ethnicity.
agree that you are a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which you're discussing it.
So
Meaning
what
that-
are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man
Are
of
you-
Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean, that's the more accurate way to put it. But when
What
we're
else would
talking
you be
about
grouped with?
with Jews, who are which is an
But it's-
ethnicity, I mean,
So
yeah.
you're not white at all.
I mean, again, it depends who's doing the grouping and how. I've seen Jews grouped with white and Jews grouped with not white. Are we just pretending that doesn't exist? That's a reality. However, as far as your generalized point, which is that we are supposed to identify people by group identity, that if we don't have a black female president, somehow black females have not been represented. So Barack Obama was in no way representative of black females because he's not a female.
No,
He's
he
black.
was. He was representative,
So
but
he was
that's
half
the point.
representative. How do you do the math on this? And why?
You shouldn't do the math on it completely statistically, but the fact
You shouldn't
is
do the math
there's
on it at all. You should
clearly
treat people as individuals.
underrepresented.
You should treat people as individuals.
Well, if you don't even want Kamala Harris to attempt to create DEI initiatives in office, then there isn't even going to be a conversation about it.
I mean, I don't think there ought to be a conversation about why we ought to be represented by race or by sex. I think that we are each individual people with individual ideas, and if that person represents my ideas, I don't care what sex, race, or sexual orientation they are.
I mean, to an extent, yes.
No,
But there
entirely.
is an issue with the lack of empathy in office. We need to be able to empathize and legislate for the people that are living in this country.
I was not
Do you
aware.
not believe that?
I was not aware that empathy is relegated to particular race solidarity.
No, but I mean, it's easier to be empathetic towards people whose experiences you can fundamentally understand based on your identity. Like, do you not believe that people have an inherent bias?
So first of all, I'm
based
not
on
sure.
identity?
I mean, we can start with the empathy itself. I'm not sure that empathy is always the best basis for actual public policy, because when you have group solidarity and empathy based on group solidarity, you're going to attempt to actually benefit the group with whom you have solidarity. So that actually cuts against
But
generalized
that's like a
public
fundamental
policy.
thing that just exists, which is why we need representation in government. Okay, cute. Thank you.
Wow, he got it this time. All right, nice. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you, Ben?
You know, it's been a day.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like an interesting setting being surrounded by 20 people that disagree with you.
I mean, the truth is I grew up in LA and then I went to law school in Cambridge. So,
So
I'm
you're
a
a lot
little
more
used to
than
it.
20.
Yeah, I've been here before.
Anyways, let's talk about DEI. Do you think that Trump should have won 2016? I'll wrap it in. It's conceptually relevant. I'll demonstrate the relevance.
Okay, sounds good. By what measure? Do I think he did win or do I think he should have won?
Do you think he should have won?
I mean, yes, I'm happy that he won. If the question is, am I happy that he won? I'm happy that he won.
Okay. Well, I'd say that Trump won 2016 because
By the way, I did not vote for either candidate in 2016. That's a decision made in retrospect.
Awesome. So I think that Trump won 2016 because of a modality of DEI. Essentially, what I'd say is the Electoral College, right, strives for inclusion of smaller states with lower populations by overrepresenting them in the overall vote. Like, you could correct me if I'm wrong, or the SAN fact checkers can. I'm pretty sure that over the last 25 to 30 years, Republicans have won the presidency given the Electoral College, not given the overall popular vote. So if you're against DEI, if you don't want inclusion on the basis of race, inclusion on the basis of gender, or even what you're saying earlier, we could even say inclusion on the basis of class, why do you want inclusion on the basis of population, rural areas, states,
We should actually use a better
in the
example. Why don't you just
Electoral
ask if I
College?
believe in the U.S. Senate? Right?
The U.S.
is a
Senate,
better
this would
example.
also apply to the U.S. Senate.
Right. Okay. So let's use the U.S. Senate because the U.S. Senate is actually even more unrepresentative of the general population than the Electoral College, which is at least a rough approximation.
It'd just be funnier to hear you say that you shouldn't have voted for Trump in 2016. But we could talk about.
I mean,
Senate as well.
that's a different subject, but
Yeah.
I'm very happy that he won, even though I didn't vote for him. I mean, we can talk about Trump later.
Yeah.
We've already done a bit. Well, I'm sure we'll do more. As far as the idea that every elected body has to be elected based on population as opposed to based on the area of geographic distribution or the states that actually pre-existed the federal government. Okay, the way that the Constitution of the United States was created was as a contract between sovereign states, which is one of the reasons why, for example, you have a United States Senate as opposed to just a House of Representatives. So is that a form of DEI? That seems like a stretch to me. The kind of DEI that I'm talking about specifically would be separating human beings based on inherent characteristics, like, for example, race, as opposed to suggesting that the United States Senate, which is obviously unrepresentative of the general population, in many
seemingly
ways,
my point is
somehow
this
bad.
is
That's
just
a check and balance, right?
Well, seemingly my point is that this is another modality of DEI. I've like no problem with you explaining to me, right, why the Senate or the Electoral College would be given the U.S. Constitution and like some contractual agreement that they had between the sovereign states. That's fine. But what I'd say is that your claim here would just imply that the Constitution upholds DEI within our electoral processes.
If your claim is
so,
that
do you think that the Constitution upholds DEI in the sense of including smaller states with less representative populations?
That is a true stretch of the meaning of DEI. But I get your point. I mean, if the idea is that the only thing that is not pure DEI in a democratic context would be sort of popularly represented votes, then I think you can make the case that basically you should get rid of every representative institution. We should go to a pure democracy because.
Well, I'm not making a
otherwise-
case for what we should replace it with. I'm making the case that it would uphold DEI. We could talk about, right, what other systems should function in the case of the Electoral College or in the case of the Senate, but that's a completely different conversation than are these systems upholding DEI.
So again, I think that you're definitionally stretching DEI. If DEI is the basic idea that all disparities equal discrimination and must be rectified by government interventionism, which is sort of the definition, then stretching that to mean the Electoral College seems like you're going pretty far afield to defend a very broad concept as specifically badly applied.
Wait, 1 second. I don't think that we need to say that DEI is equivalent to disparities equal discrimination. We could just see that DEI is like a qualm for disparities in general, right? And what we apply here in this certain modality when we're talking about the Electoral College, when we're talking about the Senate, is we're trying to qualm the disparities of the lack of population in rural areas. We're trying to qualm the disparities of smaller states compared to larger states.
so it
And
seems to me-
seemingly, you haven't really given me a response to this apart from calling it a stretch, but I do appreciate you for
No, I mean, it
entertaining the
seems
point.
to me like the argument that you're making is that in order for there to be calm and sort of conciliation inside the United States, particular racial groups have to be given particular benefits. Okay,
Well-
because that was the argument with regard to the states in the United States, right? When the Constitution was formed, the way that you came to an actual agreement in the Constitutional Convention is states were not going to sign on unless they got particular guarantees of the interests of those particular states, right? So if you're claiming that that's DEI, then the response that I would have is right, because that's how you have to come to an agreement. So if you're going to make the parallel argument with regard to DEI in, for example, the racial context, you then have to make the case that the only way that you can have conciliation in the United States is for particular racial groups to be given specific racial benefits, and otherwise the country is going to split apart, which is an argument with which I generally disagree, even if I agreed with the way the Constitution was formed.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't see like your parallel here, right? I think that DEI could exist in multiple modalities. My argument in a nutshell is nothing more than the fact that we see disparities existing in rural areas compared to metropolitan areas. We see disparities existing in the size of a state and its overall population, and you're qualming these, and you're
Right, but the DEI
losing the
DEI response to that would not be
like through like an over representation.
And the DEI
and I
response-
understand that your argument is, but all my single-handed point here is that you would say, in some sense, that this is a reconciliation to introduce more, not diversity, inclusion in the sense of a state to state in their population.
I mean,
so if you make the concession that this is DEI, would you say in the same sense that we shouldn't have
I don't make
other
the concession
DEI
that falls
practices?
within the definition of DEI that I've used. And if your claim is that I'm now in favor of, for example, subsidies to rural areas at the expense of urban areas, I'm not actually.
So do you think that
DEI
DEI would only apply in the context of race?
No, it could apply in the context of class. It could apply.
Okay,
in the
if it
context
could
of
apply in the
identity,
context of race,
identity.
class, and identity, why can't it apply in the context of a state's population and their representation in our government?
I mean, if they were to receive special bennies at the expense of other members of the population,
They
on the
are.
basis of state
They are.
population.
Yes, like Alabama or Arkansas are literally
No,
receiving special benefits insofar as a greater
No,
level
so-
of representation in our Senate and in electoral
No, that is-
processes
that-
compared to people in California. I mean, for
Trying to-
instance, that's
trying
my
to-
1 second. That's my buddy Parker over there. He lives
Parker,
in
what's going on, dude?
he lives in California, right? And
I'm fully aware
and
how
I
the
live in
Electoral College and the
Colorado.
Senate work, dude.
So I literally have more representation person for person in the sense of Parker's vote compared to my vote, because individualistically speaking, I'm from a state that has more representation, and the same thing could be said for multiple other states across America, especially in the Senate.
I'm
There's
having a
two
tough time
senators that
getting from-
represent me and everyone
Yes.
else in Colorado, and there's
Dude,
two
I understand
senators
how
that
this
represent
works.
him and the
My question
millions
is,
more people.
How are you
in
getting from point
California.
A, which is that California has 2 senators and Colorado has 2 senators, to point B, which is that we should have incredible racial carve-outs on the basis of group identity at the behest of the federal government? That is a very, very large stretch. And to get from point A to point B on the basis of the constitutional structure seems like you're going pretty far afield. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you know, the rubber band only goes so far.
That's the end of this claim.
That's great.
I appreciate you, man. Hopefully
Thanks.
we could talk more.
I hear what you're saying. My next claim is that Kamala Harris's extreme pro-abortion stance is morally indefensible. What's going on, dude?
Meet you, man.
Hey, good to meet you. Okay, so I just want to clarify the claim because
sure.
okay, so the claim that I'm making
Yes.
about Kamala Harris, let's first say like what I believe her position to be. Okay, so she has not stated any abortion law that she would not veto. Right, so the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act, for example, or late-term abortion bans, she would presumably veto that as President of the United States. That's the position that I'm taking in this particular prompt. Okay, so that is the position that I find morally indefensible. Okay, so again, I'm a very, very pro-life person, but I can see at least the sort of nuanced arguments that some people on the left try to make about abortion, even if I disagree with those arguments. The argument that she's making, which is effectively abortion until birth should be in no way regulated, I find that to be morally indefensible.
My understanding right now is that a majority of Democrats would not support abortion through birth. My understanding is the more popular position, I don't think any state lets you go through birth. Maybe I'm off on that. Maybe there's a couple.
California and New York, actually.
Okay, understood. But yeah, I think the key claim is basically, I think most Democrats would want abortion within the first few weeks prior to the development of my personal moral starting point of life is that the mind is the seat of consciousness, the brain is is where your self is. If you replace your heart, you have a robo heart, you're chilling. If you replace your brain, you're a different person, you're dead. And I think that when that brain first starts to develop, that's sort of where I see the beginning of life and where the fetus gets their first moral consideration. Would you agree that abortion before that point is tolerable?
No, I don't agree with that. But again, quick question, just as far as defining the positions.
Yeah.
So would you agree that late-term abortion is indefensible?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I that's not my position. I would
Okay,
not support
so I mean,
that.
so you actually agree with me on the
Yeah.
prompt. Okay, so now
Understood.
we get into the broader
Okay.
abortion
Yep.
conversation. That's fine. I mean,
No worries.
That's totally cool.
Yeah.
So yes, no.
Do you feel that a majority of Democrats support through like the
majority-
moment before birth?
A majority of Democrats have not supported any abortion legislation on the federal level in my entire lifetime, nor do I suppose that they will. So if there were to be a consensus 15-week abortion ban, for example, which is about the status in Europe, I would assume that virtually all Democrats would vote against that 15-week abortion ban. So, while I may agree with your more moderate position, or at least use that as a starting point, that is certainly not where the Democratic Party historically has been, nor is it where the Democratic Party is right
All right,
now.
awesome, understood. And just to understand where you begin your moral consideration for a fetus.
Where I consider
Yeah.
at conception. Right, so I believe in life, that life begins at conception. You now have a human being with potential, not a potential human being. And then the question is exactly what the moral value of that human being is. Once you acknowledge that there is, in fact, a countervailing interest to, for example, a woman's quote-unquote right to choose, once you acknowledge there's an independent
Okay, pause.
interest. Sure.
Thank you so much for your time,
Thanks.
Ben.
You made it. You're good. You can relax.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Hello. Nice to meet you. Oh wow, you look better in person. Okay, so
That's very sweet of you. I don't often get that, so thank
okay,
you.
it's fine. How do you define abortion really quickly?
Abortion would be the forcible termination of an unborn human life.
Yes, but like, why do you hold that definition? Like, would you not assume like something like a C-section would be considered an abortion?
No, because the baby is born alive. So
But I'm a
how
little
would
bit-
that be an abortion?
What does the definition of abortion have to include the death of a fetus?
Because that's literally the definition of abortion.
It literally isn't though. Where are you getting this definition from?
Where are you getting your definition from?
Let's go to like what do you like in like Mayo Clinic, like any fucking like hospital you've
A
ever gone to
C-section,
before?
a C-section ends with the birth of the child.
Right, but
I know.
but abortion,
both I and all three of my siblings were born via
generally.
C-section.
Yeah, I understand this. but
I'm
abor-
here. I'm talking to you.
I know, baby.
Thus I was not aborted.
I understand this, but like yes, but like no. Well, yes, but like no. But no, you could simply say that abortion is simply the ending of a pregnancy, right? So the ending of a pregnancy
No.
outside of the natural
can't say that.
Birth of a fetus. So I
No,
don't see that.
that's-
I don't see why you would say that like it would have to end in the death of a fetus, which is why I'm pro-abortion all 9 months, right? Because say if a woman is not able to pass a fetus in the natural way, we could have these other abortion processes that would say like, okay, like she needs some type of induction that doesn't include the actual natural expulsion of a fetus. But it doesn't always end in the death of a fetus. So I don't see how you could say that Kamala Harris' stance is immoral in this sense.
I just don't understand how you're removing the death of the fetus from the equation about abortion. That's literally the entire moral issue. You and I would not even be arguing if we were talking about C-sections or about natural birth.
But it seems like at its core, though, we disagree on what the inherent definition of
Okay,
abortion
then
is.
you could leave away. We could very easily solve this. Let's just not talk about the word abortion. Let's talk about the forcible termination of a baby.
Okay,
in the womb.
so then what do you value in the fetus then?
The life of the fetus,
Okay, so then when is this, you said it begins at conception?
Yes.
And why is that?
because that is literally the biological definition of when an independent life
Yes,
begins.
but like, why does it have moral value?
It has moral value because that's literally the biological definition of when a human life begins.
Right, but like, why does that have moral value though?
Okay, why does any life have moral value?
I would value sentience.
But why?
Right, because
Based on what?
this is simply what we value, like you and I value. Like, is it okay to like unplug like a brain dead patient, for example?
I mean, the question is whether it's okay to unplug a brain dead patient. Actually, quite a controversial one in sort of religious circles. But as far as why, I'm just wondering if somebody's in a coma and you know they're going to wake up, do you have the right to unplug them?
Coma's not brain dead though. We know that there's future sentience there. Like, it would be like a matter of like a conjunct of like past, future. Like, past, present, or future sentience. But like a person in a coma has.
I agree,
considerable future
and
sentience.
guess what? Fetuses also have guaranteed future sentience.
Well, no, because you're only valuing one half of the conjunct. That's
Well,
not right. So it would be past,
But
present, or
now
future.
you're changing the topic. I mean, we started with what's the value of the fetus.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Whoa! You know what? You know what? Just for, honest to God, just for that, I forfeit. That's like some serious efforting right there.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
I'll take
Really well
it.
done.
Thank you. Yeah, so on the topic of abortion, I think we have a big focus on the moral aspects of abortion, but I do think we should talk about the legal aspects of life, because when a baby is born, two things happen: birth certificate, social security card. When there are when it's like cells in the body, you don't get the birth certificate. You don't get a social security card because it's not alive, it's not born yet. Therefore, when it comes to like the moral repercussions of having abortion, I feel like that's very different than legally, because if a cluster of cells in a woman was equivalent to a baby, I should be able to have tax deductions on that kid. I should be able to have child care from the government. I should be able to have child support from the father. But since like the clusters of cells is in fact not a baby, I feel like morally, you can say whatever, but legally, a clusters of cells is not like
So sort
alive.
of hiding behind the legal positivist position, I think, to shield against the morality here is a problem, and I'll tell you why. So when it comes to, first of all, don't threaten me with a good time. I'm perfectly happy to have people pay paternity for children that are currently in utero. Like
Okay.
that's fine with me. In fact, I think that'd be quite good. I think it would incentivize fathers to stay with the mothers and actually be more responsible. But if we're talking about legal status, there are plenty of people in the United States, for example, who don't have legal status right now, who don't have a social security card, for example, in the United States. Obviously, we can't kill them. They're legal immigrants. We shouldn't murder them. There are lots of people in the legal status does not, in fact, equate to moral status in any sense of the term. I mean, that it's true, for example, that children can't vote and don't actually have control over any of their decision making. Right? I have 4 kids of my own, and I control their decision making because they're very small. Okay, that doesn't mean that I get to kill them. So the idea of legal status, thus being the basis of a moral status, is putting the cart before the horse. The truth is that it's because things have a moral status, that we give them a legal status, and obviously you can see that state by state, right? For example, even in the state of California, they had something called Lacey's Law for a while. I think it's still applicable, where if somebody killed a pregnant woman, that could be treated as a double homicide in criminal law. Okay, that sort of stuff applies all over the United States. So using the legal as a substitute to sort of evade the moral question ignores the fact that people make law in the states based on what their moral perception of the issue is. The law follows the moral perception, not the other way around.
Yes, I agree, but I think there is a problem with the moral perception, especially when you consider that morality varies all across America. It's not uniform anywhere. And that's a big problem, especially when you see in the South when they're having like 6-week abortion bans, which is detrimental to women's health. Because as we see in Georgia right now, there were 2 women who were pregnant who went to a hospital, get health care, and they were denied that care because there was confusion surrounding abortion laws. That's why I focus more so on the legality aspect of it, because that's something that's uniform, that's something that could be known.
It isn't uniform though, right? I mean, it does vary state to state. I mean, as you yourself just acknowledged.
True, yes.
So, you know, when it comes to sort of we can get into the specifics of those particular Georgia cases. One of them particularly has been relatively badly covered. It's about a woman who took basically both doses of the abortion medication. She took it without the supervision of a doctor. She then experienced essentially sepsis, and she went to the hospital late, and then under no interpretation, by this point, she had twins. Both of the fetuses were unfortunately dead by this point, so there actually was no legal problem with performing a DNC at that time, and the hospital misinterpreted the law. You know, but without getting into more details about that particular case, the real question when it comes to abortion was, and always will be, how we weigh 2 separate considerations. One is the moral value of the life of the fetus, and the second is the woman's right to choose. The problem is that these are sort of mutually exclusive, meaning that I don't have a right to choose about your life, right? About whether I get to kill you or not, or about the children that I have who are already born. And so the right to choose is obviated by the acknowledgement of a moral status on the part of the child, and vice versa, right? If you're willing to say that the child has no moral status whatever, then there really is no problem with abortion. The big moral problem I have with the sort of Kamala Harris position and the position that I have. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
I think I got the judges over here.
All right.
Hey, nice to meet you, Ben.
Plus, I'll see you again later, dude. All right. Yeah.
Nice to meet
How's it
you.
going? Nice to
Hey,
meet
Cam.
you.
Hey, appreciate you being here and having an open discussion.
Yeah, you bet. It's fun.
Let's say that just hypothetically, right? Baby's born.
Mm-hmm.
Mama can't feed the baby. She's not breastfeeding. Baby dies. Morally, do you feel like that would be better than if the baby would have just been like aborted before it was born?
I mean, I'm not sure that there's any. I mean, I think that it's significantly worse to purposefully kill a child rather than accidentally or through circumstances kill a child.
Not accidentally, right? She cannot.
She didn't purposefully kill the child.
She can't afford it, right?
I mean,
she can't afford to have the baby, and so you're saying that Kamala Harris is extreme, but your stance is that women are being forced to have children, even if they decide that for whatever reason. I don't care. I don't care.
Why
but
don't
for
you
whatever
care? Why
reason,
don't you care? Because you give me a very specific example.
Because it's not between me. Because it is not between me.
Right, but
it is between that mom, her health, her relationship with whoever she believes in. It is not on me.
Here's sort of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're extrapolating from a very emotionally laden example to everything. And I'm wondering how you're doing that. So you give me a case in which you have a woman who, for whatever reason, literally cannot feed her child for some reason. Adoption's not available. There are no food stamps. There's literally nothing. She's in a desert by herself and the baby's going to die. Is that abortion equivalent to a woman who decides to, you know, because she doesn't want the baby for economic reasons or because it's going to crimp her lifestyle, like whatever, you said you don't care about the reason at all. That's your words, not mine. So she's 15 weeks pregnant. She wants to kill it. That's the same. Why?
You're asking me why it's the same. I'm asking you why isn't it the same? Why is a baby who
I think it's pretty self-evidently the same,
who
not the same.
can't be born say that if she doesn't want to, if she says that I can't economically afford this child, that's like somebody going and saying, I can't economically afford this car, and the car salesperson still taking them on a test drive. Like, what's the point if they've already told you that they are not going to be able to economically afford it unless you give them, like you said, okay, what about abortion? Well, there's how many people in foster care that aren't being adopted right now today? All right,
should we kill them or what?
I'm not saying we should kill them. I'm just saying that should we wait at least until
would have been better if they were
those
dead?
people. You tell me.
No, you tell me. You're the one who's
If
suggesting
those
there's
people-
that's a matter of moral apathy, whether those kids were born or not. I don't think so.
So if kids are in foster care and not being treated well, they're being abused. They're not being fed.
That is a
they're
horrific problem, yes.
They're being locked. The fridge is being locked, and they're told they can't go get it because
that's
there are
horrible.
people who are only in it because they're getting a check. You're saying that is morally
Superior to killing them? Yes.
to before they're born. So
Yes.
you're saying that torturing a human being who's born, like they're a real life
No, I'm
human
not the one
today.
in favor of torture. You're the one in favor of unborn people
If
being
you
killed.
can't, if the only way you survive is food and water, and you rely on someone else to provide that to you, and they're not providing it to you, what would you call that?
I'm confused by.
I know you are, because your argument contradicts itself.
No, it really, really doesn't. I mean, the argument that you're making is that a born child deprived of food and water never should have been born.
No.
I don't see why that follows.
That's not my argument. My argument.
Well, okay, we're gonna take this chair. Look at that.
Hey, Ben.
Like a bro, my friend. All right.
How's it going?
Let's break open
First
a beer or
question,
something.
can men get pregnant?
Men cannot get pregnant.
Okay, awesome. So,
Definitionally.
definitionally, okay. Do men experience SA? Sexual assault?
Sure.
Got it. What about the existence of trans men?
What about the existence? Do you mean women who believe that they are men? What are we talking about here? Women experiencing gender dysphoria?
So my other question is, do you benefit from white supremacy in any way, shape, or form?
I'm going to need more specifics on what you mean by white
Well, here, let me
supremacy.
give it to you then.
Sure, please.
So I'm a transgender man.
Okay.
I've experienced SA.
Okay.
And abortion rights affect me directly. So if we're talking about the American dream that you live,
So-
why don't I have access to that? Because there's no legislation, in the history of America, that legislates a man's body, so why does mine have to be legislated? I've got a vagina.
I'm not interested in what your genitalia are.
Clearly you are. I mean, it's all over everything you make, buddy. I'm sorry. I hate to say it to you, but
I think you
it's-
can read
it's
on my
kind of an
face that I
obsession
radically
you
am
guys
not.
have.
I think you can read on my face that I radically am not. When we're talking about abortion,
No, I don't.
the-
I mean, you can present it here, but in most of the content that you have, you attack my community constantly. And you don't even realize guys like me exist who actually share a lot of similarities to you and everything, because I'm a married man of 20 years.
I've
got
I
a wife.
recognize that you exist. I disagree with your
Right.
claim
So
that you
if
are a
I
male.
was sexually assaulted, right, and I didn't have access to that abortion care, do you believe that I should have carried that child to term because
What does
I
this
was
have to-
sexually assaulted?
I mean,
No, I just want to make sure that that's what you believe. Because as a transgender man, I have seen your side of the entire political debate, never ever having the conversation of what an American freedom is. Because why am I not allowed to live my American freedom as a man? You know, I mean, you get your choice as a man to live and free and all that.
You're really moving around terminology very wildly here.
And so are you, because that's the tactics you play in your game.
I'm
And
gonna
you've
need
done
you-
it the entire time.
I'm
You've jumped from one subject to the next. You speak so fast, and I know how you work. So how does it feel to have it in your face?
Well, I mean,
Because I'm sick and tired of the shit that you have put against my community, especially black trans women. Because you constantly disregard all of our needs and then use us politically as a pawn when we're 1% of the population. Why not focus on the economy itself? All of us are struggling, and you want to focus on trans people. You want to focus on a black woman when this is clearly a glass cliff situation. America's falling apart, and let's give it to a woman right when it's all falling apart, when we'd had, 50 men run it and it looks like shit? Look at where we're at. Truly,
so-
where do you think that we're heading? I mean, it's so funny to watch
you've been going
white
for-
supremacy just fall apart the way that it is, and you ride so hard. Because guess what? In other countries around the world, women are not having children. And why is it? Because of the patriarchy and all the violence that men perpetuate, and all of this idea that abortion is somehow gonna solve it all by forcing women to have abortion instead of focusing on the real problems that we're facing in our society. We're just gonna completely ignore that, and we're just gonna go, you know what? The line item is, let's make women have babies so that we can continue this capitalistic society that we have. Why are we doing that? What? I mean, why? Because you want to push white supremacy and because you want to make your check? It does great for you? Meanwhile, people like me have to live with the consequences of all of your rhetoric that you put on a daily basis. And including my entire community and the intersectionalities of black women, men that experience SA, trans people, everyone that comes in. And I'm so sick of the idea that you can come in with this bravado, that you're this big guy that knows things because you can talk fast, you have statistics. But really, what does it really matter at the end of the day if you are harming the entire American? This guy's been accused of rape. Trump, in court documents, and you're backing the guy. Like, you have children. How could you do that to your own? Don't you have a daughter? Like, what is wrong with you, dude? I've never seen such a party just completely like the American idea, what we believe in as a country, is not what you're perpetuating. It's diversity. It's giving you tired, hungry, and poor. The Google phone you have in your pocket is because of all of the diversity we've had.
Pause.
Pleasure to meet you.
Okay, there's a lot of tension in the room now. Let's stay cordial. Let's stay respectful, please. Please, please.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you. So let's say that I'm voted out by my friends here, and I stand up and immediately collapse onto the ground. Paramedics rush in, and through some magical means, they determine that the only person who can save my life is you. You can do that by giving me a transplant.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be forced to give me a transplant?
I cannot.
Why?
Because I do not have a parental relationship with you, and thus I do not owe you a duty of care in the same way that I would if, say, you were my son.
Can a
If my
parent be
son-
forced to give a kid a transplant?
Yes, a parent can be forced to give a kid an enormous number of resources, or should be.
Can you be forced to give me blood?
No.
Do you believe that the average person should be able to be forced by the government to do something with their body?
It depends what, because that
Why
that
can
is
you
the
not be
nature of
forced
law.
to give me? Why can you not be forced to give me an organ?
Because I do not owe you a duty of care sufficient to remove an organ
Because
from
you
me.
cannot be forced to use your body to sustain my own, and that is the crux of
Because
the
I do not
abortion
owe you a
argument.
duty to
Because
care.
you cannot be forced to use your body to sustain my own, and that is the crux of the abortion argument. And the problem is, and it's very morally
You're ignoring the
inconsistent.
parental relationship.
Because there's a point here. There's a very morally inconsistent part to your argument right here. If you do not believe that you should be able to you should be forced to sustain my body using your own, then you should also not believe that a woman should be forced to sustain a child that they do not want to carry in utero. Is the same basic argument.
Well-
it doesn't matter how you get there. Let's say that you crash into me on the way out of here.
Well, no, it's
if you
actually-
hit
it's
into
not
me,
the- it's actually
yes,
not
it
the
is.
same
But it is. If you say
It
that,
isn't,
let's
though.
say that you run into me
Okay.
on the way out of here. If you crash into me, it doesn't matter that that is the reason why I am in that state. You cannot be forced to give me blood. You cannot be forced to give me an organ. You
Okay,
cannot be
that's not
forced to
actually
use your body
how
to sustain
abortion
my
works.
own.
An abortion includes a pre-existing physical connection between the two bodies. So a better example would be the so-called dead violinist example or dying violinist example that was put forward by a philosopher. I can't remember her name. The basic idea there is that you wake up in a room and I'm connected to you, right? And you have some sort of health condition, I'm connected to you, and I'm giving you a blood transfusion. And if I remove that, you'll die. Do I have a duty not to remove it? I think there's actually a fairly decent case that I actually do have a duty.
No, you do
to
not.
remove it.
You do not have
Well,
a duty to be
you can't-
forced to. No,
why are you
because
defining
you
my
do-
moral position?
You do not have a duty
My
to
moral
sustain
position is
someone
not
else's
yours,
body
clearly.
using your own. Thank you.
It's been tough to get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 5'2".
You made it.
I'm the only one in the room shorter than you. Okay, so honestly, my understanding of Kamala's plan is a return to Roe v. Wade, but in the legislative level. That seems to be the majority opinion by the American people. They were not for the removal, right? Trump is not really for an abortion ban, right?
I mean,
In
he
his
himself has said
personal
he is
level.
not.
Okay, yeah, but unfortunately, the way he governs, he puts those three folks in the Supreme Court. They do it. His vice presidential pick really wants to do it. He's claiming now that everybody wants it to the states. Nobody wanted it. No, that was not the demand. I think people are just kind of interested in protecting their freedoms. It's a bigger discussion about freedom. And I think Kamala Harris is going to be the presidential pick to protect the freedoms.
Okay, so again, I think that we have to define what we think Kamala Harris's position is. I think that it goes well beyond simply restoring Roe versus Wade, for example, which is an extremely flawed legal decision, wide variety of legal scholars ranging from right to left. Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to point out that that was a very flawed legal
we can't
decision.
pretend that like this is like a bipartisan thing. Roe v. Wade was a problem. The bipartisan thing
No,
was
you might like
having
the
Roe
you
v.
might,
Wade.
you might like the results. You might like the results of Roe
Well,
versus
I
Wade.
don't
The
have
actual
much-
legal decision is
Listen,
a bad legal
listen,
decision.
I think that
That's the end of this claim.
I'm glad you finally made it, though.
hopefully I can come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, before we go any further, we want to take a moment to say thanks so much to Straight Arrow News for powering the fact checks in this video. Straight Arrow News is an app and website that is on a mission to raise the bar on journalism in a time of media bias and mistrust. Their team of journalists believe that unbiased news should be the standard and not just the exception. So they report down the middle with facts, delivering news without bias, filter, or spin. Plus, their media mist tool allows you to discover news that's being underreported or not even reported at all by different sides of mainstream media. That's why we are so happy to be partnering with Straight Arrow News. The work they're doing gives us a complete picture of the news straight from our phones and tablets with their app. Go to san.com/surrounded or click the link in the description to check it out. By clicking that link, you're not just supporting this channel, you're also supporting a group of journalists that are raising the bar on news and focusing on serving you unbiased, straight facts. Thanks again to Straight Arrow News for partnering with us on this episode. Now, let's get into it.
My next claim is Kamala Harris's border policies will turn America into an unsafe and bankrupt nation.
I will let some of my colleagues here in the circle really talk about why they appreciate Kamala Harris's right shift when it comes to border policy, trying to deter the amount of people that are coming through the southern border. That's not something I'm particularly passionate about. So I'm more inclined to talk about specifically why you, somebody who purports himself as someone who's uber capitalist, want to remove the labor pool from this country, which always increases to business and economic growth.
Right. So I'm not interested in removing the labor pool from the country as a general rule. However, I don't believe that it's an economic benefit to the United States to bring in a low skill, low education labor pool that is drawing significantly from public benefits. For example, there are very good data to show that there's huge reliance on, say, emergency rooms, educational facilities. Based on the Center for Immigration Studies, there's a net cost to low-wage, low-skill immigration coming into the country.
You're in favor with emergency rooms just deterring people based on what they look like or what might be perceived as someone with a lack of citizenship?
No, I'm very much in favor of limiting the amount of illegal immigration to zero and then allowing a fair bit of legal immigration.
So you're more interested
in
decreasing the pool of people and population in this country so there are less emergency room visits? Or are you more in favor of actually documenting these people so we're able to track like exactly who is coming through? Like I'm kind of lacking what your argument is.
It's not about number. It's about the people who are coming in. I believe that everybody who comes into this country should come in through a legal mechanism, and that the United States ought to be able to select the people who are coming in, who are the best, brightest, and most useful to the American population, because that is the prerogative of any nation.
So do you think that the way that we do allow people in through our legalization process, especially with how much egregious obstacles people have to go through, might incentivize people to come through non-legal means?
I mean,
On average, it takes about 10 years for somebody to gain citizenship in this country. And if somebody is fleeing political persecution, I really find it interesting how conservatives always like to talk about the response to certain behaviors instead of what the root cause is. When oftentimes United States foreign policy is what creates the destabilization of countries, which is why people try to come to places where they can't get economic benefit. Your employee, Matt Walsh, was kind of schooled on this with Ryan Grimm, where he talked about specifically Haitian policy, where the government of Haiti has been destabilized over and over again by Western imperial nations. So that those citizens are trying to flee something with political persecution.
Is it your contention that anytime there's a destabilized nation across the world, even if the United States had a hand in it, then we then have a moral obligation to take in every citizen of that country who wishes to flee?
No, I think that's a huge straw man. I'm not saying that every single person from a destabilized country needs to take refuge in the United States, but I think it's important to add that context so you can understand why people are coming here.
That's a case for a different foreign policy. That's not a case for an immigration
the
policy.
The idea is people are coming in here to mooch off of our emergency rooms or mooch off of our social services,
no, I don't
which
think
is just not true at all.
I mean, no,
that's your big contention.
That is not my contention.
Okay,
My contention
I'll let you
is
speak.
I'm not claiming that the intent of people is to mooch off the system. The result of people is that they may be a net draw on benefits rather than a net contributor to the economy of the United States or to the culture of the United States, because I want people who are coming here who actually have some sort of belief in, say, American-style freedoms. I don't think everybody from all over the world has the same ideology
So
as
you're aligning with Nick Fuentes that like a lot of these people just don't have the exact same culture. These people don't have culture and they can't come here. I know that you're making that face. I know that he's an individual that you guys obviously disagree. He's somebody that's like increases calls for violence against people of certain communities. I'm not saying that you're
Nick
identical,
Fuentes,
but I'm saying on this issue particular,
he literally makes videos trying to stab me. So
see this
that's not
disdain
quite the
in your
same thing.
face though? Like this is the type of disdain I have for the exact ideology that you guys are in agreement.
I don't understand why there is anything wrong with the idea that you ought to
not think
screen
that people can
for their
assimilate?
viewpoint. Of course people can assimilate, but you ought to select from a pool of people who are most likely to assimilate. That doesn't mean that everybody has it. Do you think everybody on earth has an equivalent ideology? Try and get into the country? We shouldn't screen for ideology at all.
How would you screen for ideology? Like a basic test to show what people actually value when it comes to attributes?
Sure.
What would that test look like?
I mean, I think that would look very much like a citizenship test.
But this is not determining the ideologies of this person coming in. This is a determination.
I mean, they at least have to understand the basic.
People can actually have.
No, but people would actually have to understand the basic ideology.
How many
of the
U.S. born citizens do you think could pass a citizenship test?
Good to meet you.
Kamala Harris supports the bipartisan border bill that was negotiated by conservative Senator James Lankford and supported by Mitch McConnell. Do you not support that bill? And
I do not support that bill.
So what is your solution then?
I mean, my solution is that this actually ought not be done in a comprehensive fashion. So I have a general critique of the way that we deal with immigration in the country. Instead of trying to solve all problems at once, which is very likely to end in nothing, what we ought to first do is we ought to close the border. And
But
then
the border is closed right now. Do you agree?
The border is certainly not closed right
What do
now.
you mean? There's a small trickle of people coming over. The numbers are similar to the end of the Trump administration, no?
Well, now because of executive order, they have been reduced significantly, but...
Do you
that
not
was
agree that the same
that should
number
not
as the
be-
end of the Trump administration?
Right now,
Yes.
it is on a monthly basis, but
Yes.
that's after letting in 6.5 million illegal immigrants.
So do you think Trump was failing then at the end of his administration?
I think that Donald Trump did a better job than Joe Biden. He certainly did not do a perfect job on illegal immigration.
So Joe Biden is matching what Donald Trump is doing right now. So
After
you
letting in
applaud Joe Biden?
After letting in 6.5 to 11 million illegal immigrants,
Well,
I don't
those
think
are
you have to
border-
fill in that gap
those are
by
border-
doing like 4 months of good border policy.
Those are border encounters. We don't know how many of those people were turned away. We don't know how many of those people are still in this country. But those people make up a significant portion of our labor force as well, including in
So-
states like yours, Florida, where they make up like 5%.
So your argument is that it's not happening and it's good that it is.
It's not happening? What do you mean?
That the illegal immigration pool is not very large, and also it's good that it is large.
I'm saying you guys make up numbers all the time. It's like
That argument
20,
is not from
30
me. That's
million.
no, that's from the Wall Street Journal. I'm not making up that number.
Well, Donald Trump said he wants to deport 20 million of these guys. What do you think of that?
I mean, I think that if we were going to look at deportations, we obviously ought to tranche that out based on criminal record. We ought to tranche it out based on usefulness to the economy. I think we ought to look at each person individually and determine whether they ought to be deported or not.
So that is probably going to lead to a small trickle of people being kicked out of here. So that's not going to accomplish your goal.
Well, I mean, who said that my goal was to mass deport 20 million people all
So
at
you
once?
want 20 million undocumented immigrants to stay in America?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
no, that is not what I'm saying. I fail to see how you got from, I would like to go through one by one in the same way that we do IRS tax forms for literally every American who pays taxes in the United States and go through illegal immigrants and determine who ought to stay in the country and who not ought to stay in the
So
country.
what army is going to go over these 20 million people and with what resources? Where are you going to detain them? How are you going to get them out of the country?
I mean, you'll detain them and you'll deport them, increasing the resources of ICE. The biggest problem
with
with regard
ICE,
to... Yes.
similar to the bill that was rejected by you and...
Well, I mean, you're neglecting the part of the bill that allowed a baseline of 5,000 illegal immigrants
heard this.
border encounters before the executive branch automatically kicked in border enforcement.
So
I've been down
don't
to the
you
border,
agree we
okay?
have to
Like
allow-
I went down to the border and let me tell you what I saw at the
Oh.
border, and then we can go. Okay, so
Okay.
so
Saw with your own eyes.
But not just saw with my own eyes. Talked to the border patrol agents. Okay, the way that the Biden administration was treating the border for the vast majority of their term was to treat a claim of asylum without evidence as evidence that the person ought to be given asylum. So
you're-
the first priority was for Border Patrol to be activated to go to places where Mexican drug cartels were leaving people at the border en masse, and then to process those people and let them into the country within 72 hours. The goal of this for the Mexican drug cartels was to clear large swaths of the border of Border Patrol agents specifically, so that in those unoccupied areas, fentanyl and drugs could then be passed, human trafficking can then be passed in those unoccupied areas.
So you mentioned these cartels. You agree these cartels are profiting off human trafficking, right?
Of course.
So why don't we open up legal means for these people to come in here? Then they don't have to give the cartels money. They're making more money off human trafficking right now because of our immigration system. It doesn't allow more people. And the Republicans do not have a bill to allow more people to come here legally.
I mean, so your answer to illegal immigration is just magically legalize everyone.
No, it's to open up legal paths so these people don't have to leave
know,
their livelihood in these countries and carry a bag and walk through the jungle with their kids.
By the logic that you're using, we could make murder absolutely not a thing by simply pretending that murder is now legal.
What?
Your suggestion is that millions of illegal immigrants ought to just become legal immigrants, and then magically this would
I'm
solve the
saying
entire problem.
We have failed these people. We have benefited tremendously off exploiting these people. You and I, we have benefited from these people working hard. They just want to be here and be a part of our country. I can't think of anything more American than that.
I'm not doubting the willingness of people to come to the country. I am doubting the incentive structure that draws people to the country with rich array of social benefits that didn't exist.
What is
for the
that
vast
incentive
majority.
structure?
That incentive structure is things like Medicaid, things
Come
like
on,
free
man.
schooling.
You
things
think
like,
someone's going to leave their home in Venezuela to come here and leech off our Medicaid? These people want to work. These people want to live, man.
Okay, then if they sign a contract saying they don't receive social benefits, they're more than welcome to stay.
Well, sadly, they would take benefits if they were available to them, if they could come out of the shadows, and they would actually pay more taxes and contribute more to society. Let me ask you, if there's
Oh, passionate hands, no worries.
If there's an accident, and let's say your wife's in an accident, a car accident, the only person that witnessed it is an undocumented immigrant, they're not coming forward to be a witness, Ben. Doesn't that trouble you?
This is the reason that I should allow millions and millions of illegal immigrants into the country, is on the
It's
off
one
chance that they
reason.
might be a witness?
It's one reason that these people are being treated as second-class citizens, even though
What
they
is your-
benefit you and I.
Can I ask a question? What is your standard for whether someone should be allowed into the country?
My standard?
Yes.
What do you mean my standard? Like as far as their
I mean,
education or
creating-
their ability?
Yes. You're creating immigration policy. Who should be allowed into the country?
I think we should allow a wide variety of people. This
So
country,
everyone.
not everybody starts out as a doctor, Ben.
So-
Some people start out doing menial tasks.
So everyone. So you have no limits. How about numbers?
No,
Do you have any
there's
number limit? No numerical limit.
20,000 people die or retire in this country a day. There's only 10,000 births. We need more people.
I agree. That's why we should all have more babies.
So, okay, well, guess what? People aren't going to have them because you're not incentivizing it. Kamala Harris is with her things like $6,000 child tax credit.
Giving
Meanwhile,
people-
you guys are just trying to cause more problems and make it harder for people to raise families.
Okay, as a person with 4 children, I can promise you I have a very, very strong incentive structure in allowing people to have more kids and incentivizing people to have more kids. I
Because-
wish that government benefits were more effective in doing this. They simply have not been in particular areas of Europe. There's a different argument than the illegal immigration argument. When we're talking about illegal immigration, you seem to be making an argument there ought to be no baseline standard for who gets in and no baseline cap
I'm
for
not.
how many people get in.
I'm not saying that.
So
we
can
can
you-
come up with a figure. We
So
can
do
come
it.
up with numbers.
So now-
I'm not a lawmaker. That's what we elect people to go do
I
and
need
work
so-
out those
okay,
figures.
I need- I
but
need something-
Republicans are just fighting everything.
I need some standard.
You need me to come up with a number.
No, okay, a number or a characteristic or some sort of standard for who you would let into the country. Because right now, all I'm hearing is you just want lots of people to come into the country without any standard and any cap on the number.
No, not at all. I want people to come here who want to work, who want to be a part of this country, and we all benefit from that.
Okay,
do you
so-
think you're not benefiting
so
from
you-
these
so you-
undocumented people? Who
So-
do you think is going to
do you-
build
do
the
you think-
houses that we need
so
with
do-
our
do you-
shortage?
So do you think the people who come into the country should be eligible for all social benefits?
If they're contributing and they're allowed to contribute fully, right now they're not. They're
I mean-
using other people's social security numbers to pay social security tax and Medicare, and they're not able to get those benefits in the long run.
So again, I'm wondering how you're balancing the cost benefit to the American body politic if what you're suggesting is that day one you arrive in the country and now you're eligible for all social benefits.
I'm not saying day one
With
you're
no
eligible to all
education,
social
low wage
benefits.
labor.
Well, we can work all these details out.
Those
You're
are not
fighting over
details.
the
That's the core of the argument.
Really,
over
you're
legal
upset
immigration.
that somebody who comes to this country and works hard and makes your life better and cheaper is going to get Social Security 40 years from now?
No, not Social Security 40 years from now. Medicaid today.
So wouldn't
Educational
you rather
benefits for
than
the
get
kids today.
Medicaid and get preventative care than go to the hospital where it costs you,
I would prefer
you,
that-
the taxpayer, 10
My-
times more money?
My point, as it has been from the beginning, is that you need screening procedures for immigration.
So
This
you're
is how
saying
it's been-
Border Patrol is failing then to screen these people properly? Is
I mean,
that
that
the
is-
accusation you're making?
I'm making the case that Border Patrol certainly is failing.
How do you know
because
that? Because you talked to a couple Border Patrol agents? You know,
No, not-
that is so
No, because to-
insulting to our Border
No.
Patrol is fighting every day on the front lines.
No,
you
because-
think they're not screening these
No,
people
because-
and they're being bamboozled by some people claiming asylum and tricking them?
No, because literally today, the FBI announced that an Afghan national was let in without vetting and tried to plan a terrorist attack on
One
Election
guy.
Day. Oh, it's just one. So it's a
One
bit-
guy.
no
You know how many
biggie,
terrorists
no
were
biggie.
caught by the border under Trump?
There are over
Zero.
There are over three.
At least we're catching them.
There are over three. First of all, it's not true because a huge number of people, we don't know who they are coming across the border between ports of entry. Second of all, you're talking in this country right now at least 300,000 minors. We have no idea where they are. They're
Oh, that
handed
is
over-
nonsense.
That is not nonsense.
No, it is. It is ICE has lost track of them because it's voluntary for them to keep in touch with the system. They are not lost. They're released to their sponsors who have to go through background checks. You have no idea what you're
They-
talking
they-
about.
they do- they don't
You think
all have to-
300,000 minors are lost in America? Are you crazy?
I'm saying that. I'm not saying that. The Department of Justice
Next thing
is
you're going
saying
to tell
that.
me there's 19,000 murderers, right? Is that the next talking point?
No, that is not the next talking
Oh,
point.
okay.
But you're going to have to explain to me why it is okay for literally tens of thousands of minors to be checked out to majors, to people who are above majority age, and then for the government to not, when I say lose track, I don't mean minors
Checked
walking
out
the
to their
streets by themselves.
sponsor who goes through a background
They do
check.
not
Is that
all
what you
go
mean?
through- they do not go through.
How do you know that?
Because they're not checking in.
How
A
do you know
huge
that?
number of people.
Oh, it's voluntary. Why does our law allow for it to be voluntary then if it's not working?
The law should not allow for it to be voluntary.
Oh,
And in fact, in some cases, it is not voluntary.
So-
and in fact, human
okay, so-
trafficking is going on at scale.
It sounds
Why
like
is
you're
this so-
upset
by
when
the
the
way-
problem doesn't exist. What
I
is
have
this
a question.
problem?
Why are you okay with minors who are being checked out to people of majority age who then don't check in with the government? Is that okay with you?
I'm okay with minors being checked out to their sponsors who go through background checks who are usually family members, people that know them. You think it's just some random? You think I can go pick up a undocumented immigrant child right now?
No, but I do know that has happened to tens of thousands of kids in this
Oh,
country.
really? So
Yes.
you think they're just being released to random people?
They're being released to people who claim that they are relatives, and in many cases, they are not necessarily relatives.
How
They're
do you
not
know
check-
that?
Because they are not checking in for their follow-up appointments.
Oh, because they're not checking in for the voluntary
So you have-
follow-up appointments. So you're
I
assuming
just
the
wanna-
worst. You're assuming they're probably being kidnapped and trafficked. at this point.
I'm happy for you that you're assuming the best as to what happens with minor
I'm
children. who are
always going to
released
assume the
adults.
best about my fellow Americans. And of course, if these people are their sponsors and their background checks by these agencies, I'm going to assume the best. Unlike you, that's a weird thing to assume all this weird
No,
stuff.
actually,
man.
what's kind of weird to me is that you assume that anybody who picks up a kid without proper verification and background check doesn't check in for months at a time.
Proper
Is-
verification and background check?
What do you know about the parents? What do you know about the people who are picking them up?
I've
What do you
read-
know about the cousins? What do you know
I've
about the
read that
uncles?
these people go through background checks and they are sponsors,
solid do you
usually family members. You don't sound like
Why
you
aren't-
read anything about this. You
I-
just have some fantasy you made up about me being able to go pick up an undocumented child. Why don't you and I go try to get one later? We'll see what happens.
I have a question. Where are you possibly coming up with that since I've actually said the opposite?
You want me to name the article? You can go Google it yourself. Maybe
Yeah,
you'll
and-
learn something.
Which article specifically are you talking about?
Ben, when you get home, go on Google
Why don't you
and type
Google?
in how are undocumented migrants' children released and what is the process. You'll read all about it.
I can read all about it, and one of the things that I've read is that the immigration services in this country have not done proper follow-up.
Well, you read it
with
on
hundreds
you read it on Gateway Pundit or
No,
what?
on Wall Street Journal, at the Department of Justice, in all of the legal
tell
claims
me-
by the federal government. Yes, this is in the New York Times. Okay,
So
I don't
again, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. 300,000 children
Do
are
not
being
have
exploited in America right now.
That is not the claim.
Okay,
the,
so what is
the
your
claim
claim?
is that the federal government does not know where they are.
Oh,
that is the claim,
So
and that is
what-
absolutely valid. Do you know where they are? Do you think the federal
Do you
government
think
knows
the
where all of them
federal
are?
government should be
I have a
tracking
question. Why is it,
everybody?
I think that the federal government has a responsibility to release children who come across the border only to people for whom there is follow-up available. Yes, and if I find it very
So
bizarre that you're totally fine with people signing off on handing over children to people who merely claim to be relatives without any follow-up
Merely
whatsoever.
claim. Why do you say merely claim? You don't know what that background check
Because
is like.
usually you should have evidence that that is in fact the case.
How
And
do
the fact
you
that
know it's not?
Why is
So
the
you,
assumption
again,
that it is?
your claim is that people are taking out
Why-
kids like library books and
No, that
not
is-
providing the proper identification and background
your
information.
lack of concern about what happens to those kids when proper verification and follow-up is not done
Because
seems
you guys
disquieting to me.
create fantasy scenarios where things that aren't happening. Are there cases where some children are going to be
You're saying-
exploited?
wait,
of
hold-
course, there's tons of people in this country.
So
We're
what
the
should we do
third
to stop
largest
that?
country in the
So
world.
what should we do to stop that?
Well, you sound very passionate about this. Maybe you should write your Congress member and say we should tighten up these laws and make it mandatory instead of voluntary.
You know, in order to do that, one of the things you might want to do, close the border.
The border is closed, Ben.
No, it is certainly
Yes, it
not.
is.
In
Yes, it is.
It is certainly not
Do
closed.
you think the border was closed under Trump?
No, I don't think it was fully closed under Trump.
Oh, so you say Trump failed at closing the border?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Interesting.
Donald Trump should
So
have done
why
more
would
to
you
close
want
the
him
border.
back in there if he's
Because
going to fail again?
Because he did a better job than Joe Biden, who let in
Why? Joe Biden
6.5
has
million illegal immigrants.
Joe Biden has the exact same border encounters right now as Trump at the end of his administration.
I have a question.
If Trump was on pace to let in 900,000, if that was the case, a year.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Why is it that after a president allows in, through pure executive order negligence, having walked back the executive orders that created the policies that you're now I mean, if you want to call it purposeful, call it purposeful. They were on day one. They reneged on Remain in Mexico. They changed the standards by which
Mexico's-
asylum was claimed.
Mexico's got to play. It takes two
This
to
is-
tango. Mexico didn't want anything to do with Remain in Mexico.
Remain in Mexico was the American policy. It was Joe Biden who walked out on Remain in Mexico.
There's
The
also
fact
a
is-
small number of people. It's like a couple tens of
it- it
thousands
is-
of people.
The unprecedented level of illegal immigration is apparently totally fine with you under Joe Biden.
No, listen, we need more people in this country, Ben. There's no legal means for them to come in that are reasonable.
That
so
is
these
not
people
true.
are forced to
That
come
is
in
not
through the
true.
southern border because there's no other way.
There are hundreds of thousands of people who come into this country every year legally on visas.
Yes, and that process is difficult. We need a lot more people than hundreds of thousands.
So you're
Ben.
making a case for broadening legal immigration,
Yes!
but you are not setting any standard or numbers by which we are supposed to adjudicate whether
Because
this is
that's
good or
not-
bad.
That's not my job. All I know is it's too difficult
So
right
you're not
now.
making an argument at all. You're making an argument that basically we should just legalize everybody who wants to come
No,
into the country.
not at all.
You have
I'm
hold
fine
on,
with the
hold
number.
on.
We
You have
come
not
up
set.
with
You have
a
not set a number. You have not set a standard. You have suggested you're utterly fine with what happens to minors if they are released to adults without proper evidence.
I have not.
You have
You're
not.
putting-
You
no,
have not.
it's
You have
nonsense.
suggested that there is no major problem with
Nonsense.
exploitation of children being trafficked over the border.
I'll go
These-
with Trump's number, 1 million a year, because that's what he was on pace to let in by the end of his administration. 75,000 a month equals 900,000.
Thank you. Good for you, dude.
Hey, Tara, to
Nice
meet
guy.
you. So I'm just really unclear about what of her policies do you think are bad? Because I'm not sure I heard that yet.
Okay, the revocation. So I think first we have to define what we think her policies are.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so there is the policy that was implemented under Joe Biden, and then there's the policy that she seems to have adopted over the course of the last 45 to 60 days when she was actually running for president, where she seems to have adopted many of the prior immigration policies of the Trump administration. So which one do you think is actually her position is sort of the open question about Kamala Harris? I'm assuming that the record of the Biden administration provides a pretty good track record as to what she would do with the border were she made president.
I mean, I think what's really clear that I feel like you've overlooked a lot is that a lot of the things that Joe Biden has done that you don't love are because he first tried to do things the right way through legislation. But Congress won't do it. So I guess my question for you is, what would your plan be for Kamala if not to try to get a law through Congress when Congress won't pass them?
I'm perfectly happy for trying to get a law through Congress, provided I, actually like the law. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
But if you're talking about what she could do day one, I mean, she could actually continue to enforce the newfound enthusiasm for border security in the run-up to the election that Joe Biden has now implemented.
Well,
to remain in Mexico,
your
revising asylum,
characterization
and
of
all the
that.
rest of that.
Setting aside your characterization,
I mean, that's
how?
actually what he did.
How? Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Whatever you say.
Remain
How?
in Mexico.
Which is fraught with rape. Actually, remain in Mexico has been found to be really dangerous for the people who are stuck there.
Okay, and it is also a fact of the matter that if you're talking about controlling the border, remain in Mexico is a better way to control the border than simply releasing people into the interior with a come back to court date.
So you feel that would be better than, say, funding border security and related agencies to house those people safely?
It is generally not a matter of funding at the border. It really is not.
Then what is it?
It is a matter of how asylum is actually interpreted. So the way that asylum was interpreted for a long time was that you had to show by a preponderance of the evidence that you actually had a legitimate asylum claim.
That's not that different now.
And
It's not that different. No.
Yeah.
The claim is over. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's getting good, though. My next claim is the Israel-Hamas war would not have started under Donald Trump. It's good. This process has gotten more conciliatory over the course of time.
Okay, so what evidence do you have to support that claim?
Okay, so the latest reports from the New York Times of internal papers from Yahya Sinwar suggested that he was essentially counting on Iranian interference and help with the October 7th attacks, and that was incentivized by the fact that Iran was attempting to forestall any sort of deal between Israel and the Saudi government for Saudi to join the Abraham Accords. It was very well known at the time, and I happen to know, that the Saudi government was very much ready to join the Abraham Accords if Donald Trump had been reelected. If that had happened, that would have forestalled Hamas action because the incentive to have done what happened on October 7th would largely have been gone at that point. The entire purpose of that attack was to prevent the formation of a broader Sunni-Israeli alliance in the Middle East.
Do you think the incentive of October 7th was simply Iranian plot?
I think that the Iranians were certainly interested in facilitating the Hamas attacks,
Now-
and without Iranian support, it would have been very difficult for
I
Hamas
want
to
to.
do
I want
it.
to ask you: do you think that the conditions in Gaza in any way factor into October 7th?
I mean, I think that the conditions in Gaza certainly factor into support for Hamas. As far as the specific attack of October 7th as opposed to rocket attacks, the distinction between, for example, continuous rocket attacks that have been happening since 2006 when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip and the wide-scale terror assault of October 7th is sort of a difference in kind.
Now, since 2005, what has Israel done to the Gaza Strip to formulate or allow kind of the otherization of the Palestinian people who live in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I mean, in 2006, Hamas took over, promptly killed everybody who's associated with the Palestinian Authority, has never held an election since, and has been running the place with an iron fist.
Now, I want to understand now, with an iron fist, is Hamas the one who is putting forth the land, sea, and air blockade in the Gaza Strip?
The land, sea, and air blockade is specifically because Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip.
Now, I'm confused because if we expect that the October 7th attacks only happened because Iranian influence in the area, I don't see how 17 years of a land, air, sea blockade will happen if that's not a symptom to allowing people basically pressure cook its way into something like that happen.
Okay, the idea that October 7th was specifically as an incident caused by movement between Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah and coordination between those groups for geopolitical reasons is the claim. If the claim that you're making is that October 7th was sort of an inevitability based on the conditions on the ground in the Gaza Strip, that's not exactly how I think foreign policy works.
No, I'm saying foreign policy works in the sense that you can't ignore the overlying cause of an issue. So now when we talk about the Abraham Accords, do you not think that the Palestinian people not involved in the Abraham Accords plays any part into the region remaining unstable, specifically with these two groups of people?
The region got specifically much more stable while Donald Trump was president because of the Abraham Accords.
Again, I don't know how you can go and quantify that when the Palestinian people are not involved. 2023 was the deadliest year for Palestinian children on October 6th, according to a UN report published on October 6th. Now, if we go and keep ignoring the Palestinian problem, then I don't understand how we can continue to act like forging partnerships between Gulf Arab countries is going to promote stability to the region when we're leaving out 2 million people in Gaza and then 2 million people in the West
I mean, it
Bank.
was promoting a lot more stability in
For
the
who?
region.
For
I mean,
who?
for the Saudis, for the Bahrainis, for the UAE. For,
And then yeah, October 7th still, you're telling me October 7th still happened because of geopolitical reasons in that area. If the Palestinians are not addressed in the Abraham Accords, why do you think that there was a need for October 7th to happen?
I mean, the reason October 7th happened was specifically because of the confluence of Palestinian desire to put the issue of Palestinians back on the front pages and an Iranian desire to use that as a wedge issue to destroy the Abraham Accords.
Front pages as opposed to what? As opposed to it being silenced through political plays under Donald Trump to promote these Abraham Accords that, again, don't achieve the root issue of the problem. The Palestinian people cannot be left out of the table when it comes to a resolution or an accord dealing with the conflict.
I mean, okay, so the root issue of which problem specifically?
Of the problem. Do you agree with the legal settlements in the West Bank?
With the illegal settlements? I mean, so it is...
First, do you consider settlements illegal?
No.
Under international law, it's considered illegal.
That is not true.
I mean, the UN and most international foreign bodies have decided that those settlements are legal. Now, do you think that is just the case of...
I think the UN is trash. But
so that's what I was going to say, is that if the UN is trash, if nobody around this area can be brokered into as a third party, if Israel's not allowing third party investigators to come to the Gaza Strip and determine what's happening there, who can justify, who can have the moral authority in the region and say that this is what's happening, that this is a reason of this, or that putting them towards the backside of the conflict is this reason? I need to understand from you, what's your prescription for the area, for the Palestinian people? Are you like Ben Gvir, who says that there's three options: willful emigration of the Palestinian people, like leave, live under subjugation as a second-class citizen of Israeli rule, or third, die? What's the option?
No, I mean, moderating and then electing a government that is worthy of actually governing its people and not stealing billions of dollars from its people, either the Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad, or Hamas, would be an excellent start.
So I need to understand, do you feel like they have the opportunity to do so when they're under the subjugation of 17 years of a blockade by an occupying power? If for 17 years, since the disengagement of Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip, Israel was able, by the flick of a switch, to turn off the electricity, water supply, and fuel reserves. Right now, we know that in the north of Gaza, up until today, 2 weeks went by where no humanitarian aid was going in. There is no Rafah border anymore. There is no humanitarian going through there. It's been demolished.
Okay.
And then in the other...
I mean, it's not true that humanitarian aid is not going in. Actually, just a couple of days ago,
Just
100
a
trucks...
couple of days ago, because since October 1st, there was no aid going to the northern part of Gaza.
Because there are ongoing anti-terror operations in the north of Gaza.
So does that mean that the civilians who are in the northern Gaza are not subject to humanitarian aid because there's a military action by an occupying force?
It means that there's no actual excellent way of distributing that aid. This has been a major problem with the humanitarian aid throughout. The last time they sent 100 trucks, this is what I was going to mention, they sent 100 trucks of humanitarian aid in just a couple of days ago.
Before October 7th, 500 trucks were needed to sustain life in Gaza. 100 trucks were supposed to say thank you.
At least half of the aid is being stolen by Hamas and then
Again,
resold at higher prices.
I need you to understand that almost every international humanitarian rights group says that this humanitarian crisis is man-made. It is man-made.
I agree that it's man-made.
And I know who you think the man is.
Yes.
I'm telling you, there's only...
It's not Hamas. Wait, does Hamas have any agency here at all?
I'm telling you that right now, if
Do
you
the
want
Palestinians have any agency
the
here at all?
Palestinians absolutely have agency, but again, with an occupying force, what does the agency limit to? If a Gaza fisherman can't go 6 miles past the nautical line that Israel has arbitrarily placed, what agency is there to
Why do you
limit
think
to?
that Israel placed that line?
Again, that's what I'm telling you, is that how
Just
do you
for fun or
expect-
what? Do you think Israel wants soldiers in the Gaza Strip?
Again, here's the thing.
Because they literally pulled that road out in 2005.
I know that high level cabinet members in the Israeli government right now is saying that we're going to resettle in Gaza. That this is the plan. That
That
we're
is
not
a
going to
fringe
release.
position in the Israeli
Now,
government.
do you
It is
agree with that
certainly-
position? Do you?
No, with the resettlement of the Gaza Strip, no.
Okay, so you want the Gaza Strip to remain Palestinian land?
I'm perfectly happy for it not to remain Israeli land, but that doesn't mean that it can be governed by the current entities that the Palestinians are choosing to govern themselves. The last entity they did, Israel pulled out in 2005. A terrorist group now ruled the region and then promptly used it to build kilometers of terror tunnels that outsize the London subway network.
I want you to understand, Ben, that there is no way for any type of democratic institution or process to happen in the Gaza Strip when there's an occupying force who will go and subvert it. If you have Israeli parliament
So they don't
members-
have agency.
If you have, I mean, it's hard to when there's an occupying force under your throat.
Believe it or not, it actually is not that hard not to vote for terrorists.
It 100%.
It is not.
It's not. It's 100% impossible for you to go and make that distinction when there is no alternative. Right now,
that is not true. There's not an alternative.
No, there is no
was.
alternative to life under no occupation for the Gaza Strip. Again, I'm asking you simply, is that right now, if you have Israeli parliament members, Knesset members who are saying that we plan on resettling Gaza, that this is not
That is
Israeli
not
land.
a government position.
No, again, these are people who can fracture the government of Israel in
You
an
know what is a
instant.
government position? The government of Hamas that is currently holding 100 hostages, including babies. This war would be over today.
And the
if
hostages
Hamas
should be
gave up the
released, and no
hostages.
civilians should be involved in the
Should-
conflict.
should Hamas surrender?
So I want to
Should Hamas
ask you,
surrender?
I think that there should be no civilians involved in this.
Should Hamas surrender?
Surrender to who?
To the Israeli government.
Will the Israeli government stop bombarding civilians if that is? Because
If
right
Hamas
now,
surrenders, yes.
Because right now we saw them march from the north to the south of Gaza, and they said that the whole goal of this war was to what? Was to return the hostages, correct?
I mean, there was a dual goal.
There was
One
a
was to
dual
destroy
goal.
Hamas,
Now,
and the other was to return the
See,
hostages.
that's the thing. When I come to the table to argue with someone, I want to assume that there's good faith, not that there's a dual goal or dual ambitions in the process.
Of course, there's a dual
Because
goal.
that's
If
right
there were
now-
no hostages, the singular goal would be the destruction of Hamas.
Okay, now understand this. Netanyahu will continue to project this war because he's facing crime and bribery charges. So there's no, again, I need to understand, Ben, if there's
There
no...
was a full-on unity government in Israel, including his opposition, until a
and
couple
so
of months
his
ago.
unity government will not let him end this war, except the ceasefire
The
deal,
unity
because they
government
can
included people
fracture the
like-
government. Yes or no?
No, the-
Can Ben Gvir, if he decides to call for snap elections, can him and Smotrich not decide that this is what we want to do, and Benjamin Netanyahu is immediately supposed to,
I promise
to
you,
run for prime minister?
If there were
elections?
if there were snap elections today, Netanyahu first of all is leading in the polls. But even if he were not leading in the polls, Benny Gantz, Gadi Eisenkot, Naftali Bennett, people who are actually running in the election against Bibi Netanyahu, would be pursuing extremely similar policies in the Gaza Strip, simply because Israel cannot allow Hamas to continue to govern the Gaza Strip.
Awesome. So then the hostages are placed second to this. So this isn't about, there can't be two dual goals.
Of course there can.
How?
Why could there not be two
Because
dual
one of
goals?
these goals is completely antithetical to returning to the last one.
What? How?
Because when
in fact, they are deeply connected. If Hamas does not surrender, how are the hostages getting back?
Again, I'm saying because every operation that dealt with returning the hostages involved the death of arguably more civilians and more hostages in the area. Yep.
Good to meet you.
Hey, Ben, nice to meet you. So just returning to the prompt that the war in Gaza wouldn't have started if Trump were president.
Yes.
The reason that I disagree with that so vehemently is just looking at history. I don't think that the bombing of the Beirut embassy would have happened if Jimmy Carter had won in 1980. I don't think that Nixon is responsible for the 6-Day War. For the Yom Kippur War. I don't think that if Dewey had defeated Truman, that Israel wouldn't be independent. Israel is a sovereign state. They make their own decisions based on their own security issues. We're both Jewish men. I think we can both say that Jews are very independent and that we don't need to be told what the US government wants to be able to make our own decisions. So for all those reasons, again, just looking at the history of the region and how all these other wars developed because of situations on the ground, I just think that it's unfair to say that either political party in the United States is responsible for the war-making policy of the Israeli government, whoever is in charge.
Okay, but we're not discussing the war-making policy, which was a response to October 7th. The claim was really whether October 7th would have been launched by Hamas, knowing that Israel has complete military superiority over Hamas, which Hamas must have known. Why that gets launched on October 7th, why that didn't happen, for example, under Donald Trump or any time in the intervening 17 years from when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. And the rationale that I'm suggesting is that basically, the Biden administration came in, they decided to take an antithetical view to the Saudi government, not just the Israeli government. They came in, they were very unfriendly to Saudi Arabia, for example, delisting the Houthis as a terrorist group. They started to draw closer to the Iranians in an attempt to pursue a revision of the JCPOA. They attempted to draw distance between themselves and the Israeli government. Hamas saw this, Hamas and Iran saw this, and they decided that the best way to put pressure on the Abraham Accords more generally and to forestall any prospective peace deal between the Saudis and the Israelis would be to launch the attack right now.
See, and what I would argue is what was much more relevant to the launching of the attack on October 7th was Yahya Sinwar being released by the Israeli government in exchange for the name of the soldier is escaping
Gilad
me.
Shalit.
Gilad Shalit, thank you.
That happened 10 years ago. I mean, that was 2000.
I know, and I think you would acknowledge that the sophistication of this plan would have taken years. I don't think it was planned in relation to anything the U.S. government was doing. Again, I point to all of these other attacks and wars that happened over the year that had nothing to do with who was in power in the White House. It had to do with specific situations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I just don't think it's helpful for us to pretend that the U.S. is the determining factor in this war. I think you would agree.
The reason it's helpful, I think, is because when it comes to foreign policy, this goes to sort of a root issue about foreign policy that's rather interesting to discuss, and that is the belief that when the United States draws away from American allies, when the United States draws significant distance with American allies, particularly in regions of the
drawing
world
away from American allies. That's Trump that did that. He's the one that says NATO's a bad idea and us being allies and having an internationalist foreign policy is a bad
to be
thing.
fair, the actual policy of President Trump, which was to actually increase the amount amount of funding from each NATO nation into NATO.
No. That was Obama.
No,
that was Obama in 2014.
That was
It was.
They increased the amount of defense
Trump
spending
ran on
under
that
NATO.
issue.
Yes, and that was what. And that's
But Obama's the
results
one
were-
where the policy was actually implemented.
Well, no, the policy was also
about the
implemented.
2% goal.
The increase happened
And
under
on
President
top of
Trump.
that, NATO expanded under Biden. So
NATO
I'm not
expanded
su-
under Biden as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It didn't expand under Biden preemptive to the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
No, I'm not arguing that. But I'm saying if the question is who has been more dedicated to our system of alliances overseas, it's clearly the Democratic Party.
I mean, that is clearly not true. If you're talking about what has effectually made American allies stronger, the answer would not be the policies of the Biden administration. I mean, if we want to talk Ukraine, we can. We can talk about the slow walking of aid to Ukraine throughout the Ukraine war. I'm a big advocate of the idea that the United States actually should have pursued a policy of rushing more aid into Ukraine and then pursuing an off-ramp as soon as possible, sort of Henry Kissinger's suggested policy early on in the war. But if you're talking about...
so then we
for
would
ex-
agree that it's a mistake for Republican congressional officials or
To cut
officials
aid to
in
Ukraine?
Congress
Yes.
to cut aid to
Yes,
Ukraine. Okay.
Yes. When it comes to the Israel-Gaza war, the Israel-Hamas war, which is what this led off with.
Yeah.
Again, my contention is that the timing was driven specifically by a desperate hope by Hamas and Iran to break the burgeoning Saudi-Israeli and Sunni-Israeli alliance that was happening in the Middle East, and the best way they could see to do that was to launch an attack to bring up the issue that had largely been sidelined by the Abraham Accords, because it turns out that a great way to make a deal between countries that disagree on issue A is to make a deal on issues B,
But
C,
that
and D.
presumes that the Sunni American alliance against the Shia Iranian-backed alliance only started under Trump, and that's just clearly not true. We've been aligned with Sunni-led governments for at least the last 50 years.
The realignment of the Middle East
The
under President
alliance
Obama.
with Saudi Arabia goes back to World War II.
I mean, of course, that's true. It's also true that Barack Obama's distancing from Saudi Arabia in favor of, for example, the JCPOA, which Saudi opposed, so did the Israelis, so the Bahrainis, so did all the countries of the Abraham Accords. And then the return to that ideology under Joe Biden exacerbated potential conflict in the Middle East.
I don't agree with that, but if anybody else wants to go, we don't have a lot of time. Thank you.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing okay, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. So, I guess my first lead into this question is, can you tell me what did Trump do to potentially prevent this war from happening, and what did Biden not do, or what did he fail at that ultimately caused it to happen?
Okay, sure. So the Trump administration, by drawing closer to Saudi Arabia, by attempting to broker the Abraham Accords and successfully doing so with a multiplicity of countries in the region, weakened Iran. He also weakened Iran by keeping massive sanctions in place, which really prevented them from spreading terror in the same sorts of ways that they did under the Obama administration or the Biden administration as well. The Trump administration was very clearly and obviously pro-Israel in a way that the Biden administration has not been. They've been a little bit more shaded on the issue.
In what ways?
So the United States, for example, acknowledging under Donald Trump that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, continuation of military aid to Israel without any attempt to condition or slow walk. Joe Biden, from the very beginning of the war, was basically attempting to slow walk or condition aid based on certain things that were happening in the war. This sort of stuff and the preview of that sort of stuff before October 7th, distance that was drawn between the Israeli government and the American government leads opponents of Israel to believe that the United States is not going to be in their corner, and that leads to
Do you
to
think
greater
that the
conflict.
United States has, in any way, shape, or form, not shown that they are not in support of Israel? I mean, one of Kamala Harris's talking points that every time she starts is that she believes that Israel has the right to defend itself.
I mean, so just this week, the Biden administration put forward an open threat to embargo arms to Israel earlier this year.
Because
there was
of
an actual
why?
embargo against Israel.
Because of why?
Well, I mean, they're claiming that it's because of lack of humanitarian aid in the northern Gaza
Yes.
Strip. That
Genocide.
can be their claim. I don't actually. Okay. Anybody who claims that there's a genocide going on in the Gaza Strip does not understand the definition of the word
Don't
genocide.
tell me what's the definition of genocide.
A systematic destruction of every member of a population.
Is Israel a system?
But no.
Are they on their way to completing and fulfilling a genocide?
No, there are 2 million.
Potentially, if they kept on going the
Not
same
e-
way that they're doing, could they completely eradicate
Israel has
the Gaza Strip?
Israel has the military capacity to do that, and they have
Yep.
certainly not done that. And the reason I can say
But
they have
they're
not
on
done
their
that
way.
is in you know how long it would take them at the current rate to
Low-key.
do that, especially given the fact that they are completely targeting terrorists.
Are they completely targeting
Yes,
Are
yes.
children terrorists? Are the children the dead babies?
targeting
the kids?
civilian collateral damage is not the same thing as targeting civilians.
But is that not a byproduct of genocide?
No, that is not. Genocide is where you systematically destroy a population specifically because you wish to kill the civilian population. That is it.
He's right. That's not very pro-life.
Well, no, it turns out that Hamas is not pro-life when they hide behind children
and
and women.
neither is Israel when they drop bombs and nukes on Palestinian villages
Okay,
and families.
are you suggesting that Israel is using nuclear weapons?
Is a bomb automatically nuclear?
No,
Y'all tell me.
not even remotely.
So that's what I said, a bomb.
Okay, Israel uses as small munitions as possible to target specific terrorists. Okay, they do this using drone technology. They have to go through 4 layers of legal before any strike is actually approved by the upper layers of the Israeli government. I've seen this actual process in action. I've seen the actual footage at Palmachim Air Force Base in which Israel goes through the process and shows exactly how they have to go through multiple legal steps in order to green light a hit on a terrorist. And they have they've released footage of this, them calling off particular strikes if they believe that the minimal amount of civilian casualty damage cannot be maintained. So the basic idea, again, what you're talking about here is a population of 2 million Palestinians who are living in the Gaza Strip. The total number of war dead at this point, according to best available statistics, is somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000 dead. That is not a genocide. It is a horrible, horrible war with horrible human casualties. That is not a genocide.
To your
Definitionally, it is
definition,
not.
which I will have to disagree with. But that brings me to my next question.
Name a war that isn't a genocide by your definition.
One that isn't a genocide?
Yes.
There's plenty of genocides. They've happened.
I mean,
I don't know what your point is.
My point is that you don't seem to be distinguishing between the definition of a war and the definition of a genocide.
Well-
You're saying that if mass casualties happen, it is necessarily a genocide. I'm saying that is not true.
Got you. My next question, do you believe Israel has the right to the... Yeah.
Well, we're going to solve the Middle East in 56 seconds. Go for it.
Definitely not. My question is if this were in the context of the United States, if everything were the same conditions of what you see to be terrorism, what you see to be from the Israel side, but it happened in the United States and the innocent civilians that died were United States citizens, would you see the same thing to be justified?
In what? So let's say that the United States had launched an attack across the Mexican border, specifically targeting civilians, slaughtering 1,200 of them, taking 250 hostage. And then the Mexican government had retaliated by attempting to solely target military targets, and our military men and women were hiding behind civilians. That would be the comparable condition.
Yeah, so U.S. citizens would be killed in hospitals and other things
I would
like
not
that
blame the
in
Mexican
United
government
States.
I would not blame the Mexican government for targeting the personnel who were responsible
No,
for the
that's not what I'm
kidnappings
asking.
and
I'm
murder.
asking, do you see it to be ethically justified for them to kill innocent Americans at the same degree that they killed innocent Palestinians?
Again, the question of killing civilians is a question about who's hiding behind the civilians. Israel's not going out of its way to kill civilians.
That's not an answer to the question.
Yes, it is, because you're mischaracterizing the actual situation on the ground.
How?
Because of
I
what
said
I
the
just
same
described.
conditions. I said the same conditions.
We didn't solve it. Oh. Yeah, so many friends, let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to see. I want somebody who didn't get like a full time, who had to like. Oh my gosh. I choose Tyler because he's been sitting behind me the whole time, and I feel bad for the dude. He's really wanted to talk, so let's have a conversation.
My claim is that Donald Trump did not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Okay, so yeah, I think it's simple. I think Trump helped facilitate a fake electric scheme to override the election in 2020, to have Mike Pence not certify the election, and then allowed violence to happen at the Capitol. So Donald Trump gave a speech for an hour and a half where he would say things like, "Fight like hell, they're stealing the country away from us." And then when people got to the Capitol, Donald Trump sat there for 3 hours and watched them. When his aides, his family, and everyone was telling him, put a stop to the violence, call them, tell them to go home. He did not. And I think that is an example of Trump not committing to the peaceful transfer of power. He was allowing the violence to happen when he could have stopped it.
Okay, so as far as allowing the violence to happen when he could have stopped it, I'm wondering exactly what he could have done given the fact that the Capitol Police were activated, in fact, pretty quickly in the middle of that debacle. As far as not committing to the peaceful transfer of power, do we mean verbally or in action? So I agree with you verbally. He never suggested that I am going to leave, and then he did. So so I'm not sure actually how much we disagree on this matter. I thought that January 6th was terrible. I thought that his behavior between the election of November 2020 and January 6th was bad. There may be disagreement on the extent to which we believe incitement took place as opposed to bad behavior that raised the temperature that I think was really, really negative. As far as not committing to the peaceful transfer of power, he clearly committed to the extent that he left, right? I mean, Joe Biden has been president for the last 3.5 years. For how much of that he's been mentally aware. But I'm just wondering what sort of where do we disagree?
Yeah, well, I'll quote you, right? January 6th was the worst thing to happen since 9/11. Right, and I just want to be clear that you agree he verbally did not want to commit to the peaceful transfer of power. He tried to stop it, yet you are still saying that he should be the president of the United States.
Well, I mean, he did
right,
not.
That is your claim, though. He should be the president of the United States, and you agree he verbally did not commit to the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, I mean, he did not verbally suggest that there ought to be a violent uprising, revolution, or military
but
coup.
he also didn't stop it, right? So there were people inside the Capitol, and he sat for 3 hours. His closest aides.
He should have spoken earlier. I agree with you.
Yes, and they were telling him, like, Trump, you have to do this. You have to stop. He was informed at 2:14 p.m. that they were outside the Capitol saying, hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence. His aides went up to him and said, they are saying this, you need to stop something. What does he do? At like 2:24 p.m., he says, Mike Pence is a traitor, right? That was his tweet. Why do you think he would tweet that when he knew the violence was going on? They were saying, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence had to go into hiding. Why do you think he would tweet that at that moment?
I mean, I disagree with him tweeting with that.
I'm not saying you agree with it.
So the question as to why Donald Trump does anything is a matter of,
but
public speculation.
You're a smart guy. I'm asking for your speculation.
I mean, I don't. If your question to me is whether I think that Donald Trump wanted Mike Pence murdered, I think the answer is no.
I'm not asking if he wanted him murdered. I'm saying, do you think he wanted the violence to stop?
Do I think he wanted? Yes.
Really? So his idea to stop the violence was saying Mike Pence is a traitor.
I think that he was in control of the forces that he was in control of, and the Capitol Police weren't in control of Nancy Pelosi.
What was he? He was the president of the United States.
Right, and the military was
instead
activated.
of saying, hey, get out, he said, no, Mike Pence, you're a traitor. Okay. Why do you think he would say that at that moment?
Okay, I just expressed to you that I can't see into his head because I have a hard time.
But you can make a guess, though, right?
Well, but can I ask you why you think he did that?
Why do I
mean, you said that he didn't want to be hung.
So this is what I think
he didn't want to be hanged, right?
Yes.
You said that.
Yeah,
So
I don't think he wanted to be hanged. I think that Donald Trump was indifferent to what happened in so far the violence Mike Pence. I think he wanted a lot of chaos. He wanted violence to delay the certification of the vote, which he was successful with, in hopes that there would be confusion and someone else might step up, like another senator, so they could allow to put forward the fake electorates. Because that was the plan. That was in Greensboro's plan to do that, and that was the whole idea. So yes, Donald Trump was okay with the violence because he did not want the certification to happen. And in fact, for the first time in American history, he delayed it. And to me, it's like, Ben, I really like you, but I think there's a lot of attributes that I like about you, especially your American values. That is the antithesis of American values. Allowing that to happen, wanting that to happen, and then, yeah.
Okay, so I think that Donald Trump obviously should have done more. I agree with you. He should have done more on January 6th. I think that he shouldn't have tweeted that about Mike Pence. I disagreed with what he was saying about Mike Pence's in the entire electoral scheme between November and January. As far as not committing to the peaceful transfer of power, again, what I will say is that the legal transfer of power did in fact take place. He did not, in fact, initiate a militia to storm the Capitol of the United States.
Trump's will.
Okay, but
that's the issue. I agree. It happened because of the guardrails of democracy, but Donald Trump did not want it to stand.
Okay.
Do you agree that Donald Trump did not want that election to be certified?
I mean, sure.
So he did not want the peaceful transfer of power then?
I mean, if the election had not been certified, then there still would have been a legal process that took place, right? I mean, the question as to...
And you would have been
hold on,
against
can I ask
that.
the opposite for just a second? So is your contention that Donald Trump actually would have been in favor of, for example, like a military coup to keep himself in power?
I think Donald Trump absolutely would have. And all evidence points that he was trying to find any way he could stay in power.
Okay.
He was, and this is.
I think he was trying to find any way to say that he didn't lose. I don't think that he was trying to activate any way that he could stay in power. That's not quite the same thing.
No, him saying that he wasn't trying to lose is different from him sending down fake electorates with fake signatures to fraudulently steal the election.
Okay, in order for there to be an insurrection, for example, you'd have to activate the military.
I didn't say an insurrection.
Okay, so again,
all I'm saying is all of Donald Trump's behavior has suggested he did not commit to the peaceful. He did not want the peaceful.
If you're asking me to defend his behavior on January 6th, you'll notice that I really haven't.
Yeah,
so I'm
I feel
wondering
like
exactly
you're underplaying of how horrible this was.
I mean,
and that's the issue.
Which
I
part?
think are
are you talking about the riots? Are you talking about his behavior?
I'm talking about the fake electorate scheme and the idea that and allowing the violence for 3 hours to happen in the Capitol when they were under attack. The senators, the people that we're supposed to protect to uphold our democracy, he was attacking, and he watched it happen on TV when everyone around him was stopping. And I agree that you think that's bad, but you're still saying, you know what, that guy did that. He let our democracy attack, make him be president.
Well,
that's your position.
Yes, because
right, that is your position.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
and just so we're clear what the stakes are.
Yes.
This man would want to do it again.
Okay, so let me ask you about that. Can I ask you about that?
Can I quickly say one
Sure,
more thing?
please, go ahead.
Yeah. JD Vance has said he would not have certified the election.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You say that he'd want to do it again. Can I ask you how?
I mean, he could do like the exact same scheme with fake electorates, except
Wait,
this
wait,
time,
wait.
you know what? JD Vance would be like, yeah, I'm not certifying the election. What do you mean?
I mean-
all Mike Pence had to do was
Well,
not.
no. But
yeah, sorry.
practically speaking,
Yes.
he is currently not in office, correct? He's not
Well,
the
yeah,
president
but
of the
you
United
want him to
States.
become president. And
Yes.
so
Yes,
I
I do.
agree. If he's
Okay.
not president, he can't do it,
Correct.
which is why I don't think anyone
And
should
then-
vote for Donald
so,
Trump.
So wait, so I have a question. Do you believe, and this is really the question, because if you're talking about he's going to do it again, the only opportunity that he'd have to do it again, presumably, would be if he won and then he were running for, say, a third term.
No, I disagree. I think he can do it for someone else. He might do it for another candidate that he likes that uphold the MAGA values. MAGA has taken over the Republican Party, much to your much to your chagrin. I agree, it's bad, but he absolutely would do that again to someone who's loyal. And JD Vance has said he would not certify the election. I think that's a real
find that-
threat.
I find
and you've already acknowledged that you can't predict Trump. You can't even know why he'd be thinking anything.
I find
so
that-
how could
I-
you say that won't be a threat?
because
that could happen?
because I find it highly implausible that Donald Trump is so caring about somebody who's not Donald Trump. in
Really?
terms of
What about
electoral
Donald Trump
prospects.
Jr.?
You think he's going to do that for Donald Trump Jr.?
I think he'd do it for Donald Trump Jr. I think
Really?
he would do Vivek Ramaswamy.
I think
he would do it for anyone who's loyal to show that they're still upholding the MAGA name, and he will want the Democrats to lose.
You're entitled to your opinion on it. I think that's radical catastrophism. I think that
it
when
already
it comes
happened
down,
once, right? You're saying it's radical catastrophism that almost happened once. The only reason
because
it
the
didn't
conditions are
Mike
not
Pence
the same, and it's not possible for them to be the same. Okay, when it comes to the actual election itself, and you say, and you want him to be president. Okay, let me be clear about my position throughout this election cycle. When there were primaries, I was not supportive of President Trump in the primaries. When it comes down to a binary election, everybody now has a choice. Okay, there are only two candidates left. I've made pretty clear, I think, over the course of this debate, the myriad reasons why I don't support Kamala Harris. Okay, now Donald Trump is on the other side. So the question is, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to sit it out? Am I supposed to
I think you're not supposed to vote for the person who you said helped do the act that was the worst act in America since 9/11. Yeah, I don't think you should vote for him. Okay, call me crazy. I think that when someone is trying to overthrow the election, you shouldn't vote for him to be president.
Okay.
Is that like such a crazy idea?
I think that the bottom line is that when you're in an election, you vote for the person you think will be the better president for the country. And what I liked about President Trump was his first term, not his activity between November and January. That's the simple answer. You're not going to get me justifying January 6th. You're not going to catch me pretending that I think his activity on January 6th was good. I also think that it is an act of catastrophism to suggest that Donald Trump is going to facilitate the same exact thing he did on January 6th because the conditions are not the same. In fact, if you want to prevent him from doing the same thing, probably you should vote for him because then when he's president again, he's not going to be able to run for a third term.
I think gambling with democracy is dangerous, and that's what you're suggesting we're doing.
In what way?
We already have a man who's shown that he would overthrow the election. You're like, you know what? Let's roll the dice again. Let's see if he does it.
No.
You agree it's possible he might do it, right?
No, I don't think
You
that's
think it's
possible.
impossible. He might
For him
not do
to
that.
overthrow the election?
For
I don't think.
for him to do the same electric plot and not certify the election, you think that's impossible for him to do again?
Yes, I do not think that will happen.
There's
again.
no possible world where that happens.
I do not think that he is going to have the capacity.
Yeah,
with a-
I mean, we already seen him do it once, and now it's impossible to do it again. Yeah, I just find that
I have a
bit
question.
crazy.
How's Chuck Schumer going to facilitate Donald Trump's fake elector scheme?
Sorry?
How would Chuck Schumer, the current Senate Majority Leader, facilitate a fake elector scheme? I'm acting on a practical level. That is not going to happen. So again, you can think whatever you think about Donald Trump's intent. I can think whatever I think about Donald Trump's intent. In order to actually, commit a crime, let's say this is a crime, you'd have to have motive, means, and opportunity. Okay, he doesn't have means or opportunity. So it makes it difficult for me to believe that he would do this.
Yeah, I think he will. I mean, all evidence. Sorry.
That's
all right. Thank you so
Thanks so much.
I was
You
up
bet.
on time.
Thanks a lot.
This is the second time we've met too, by
Oh,
the
really?
way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's been a long day. I thought it was a lot of fun. Other than a couple of minor hiccups, I think everybody was coming at this in good spirit and wanting to have a fun conversation. There are a lot of intelligent people in the circle, and it was fun to hear what they had to say.
I think Ben was significantly more respectful than Charlie Kirk was, and a lot more well-informed than Charlie was.
I'll give him credit for being a nice guy, and he seemed to be having fun, and he seemed to be in good spirits.
With that said, I think there were a couple topics where he was being kind of dishonest.
If you speak quick enough and you don't really have someone who's familiar on the topics you're talking about, we can kind of gloss over things that are kind of shaky in terms of argument.
I think that Ben overwhelmingly is probably the best debater that the other side of the aisle has. However, I still think that what he stands for, what he stands behind is really detrimental to the state of America and the people in it.
I thought that there were a couple of interesting arguments about abortion.
I didn't get a chance to speak because it was pretty competitive, but Ben's third claim about abortion being morally indefensible was so frustrating for me to hear. We are in a unique chapter of this issue in that we now have legislation that has been passed on the subject that we can look at the effects of what it's doing to our country. These are real instances of mothers who are dying because of this legislation.
And then what about the trans gentleman?
I mean, that wasn't an argument. It was an emotional appeal. Everybody's entitled to their emotions.
To be fair, I didn't really expect to get too many points across because I've seen how Ben has worked. So I really wanted to kind of give him a taste of his own medicine so he can see what it's like.
Somewhat irritating when people decide to take advantage of a time to have a discussion or an argument to simply rant for minutes on end. But again, person's entitled to their feelings.
If I can name one person from the circle that I thought did phenomenal, it would be Guy.
I would say Guy was probably the MVP today.
Guy did a really good job on the border, exposing how there's a lot of lies from the Republican side about the bipartisan border bill.
I have never seen a performance like that. I personally learned a lot, and I bet a lot of people at home did too.
There was a fellow who gave some interesting arguments about immigration, although I think he lacked standards with regard to what he would allow in and who he would allow in.
I actually was a bit surprised to hear him say one of those talking points that I mentioned, the 300,000 kids have disappeared. I thought he was a little above that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Tyler did a really good job as well, especially when he sort of held Ben's feet to the fire on the issue of January 6th.
It is indefensible, and it's anti-democratic and anti-American values. And it's the one weakness I think Ben Shapiro knows he has.
Most of the reason that people are supporting Kamala Harris has almost nothing to do with Kamala Harris and simply to do with animus for Donald Trump on a personal level.
I am proudly voting for Kamala Harris. I think it's a no-brainer to make sure that the guy who has no interest in maintaining our democracy gets back in the White House.
Kamala Harris has a better economic plan, better border plan, pretty much across the board. I think she's a better candidate.
If Donald Trump is elected, the average American will be worse off, and if she's elected, they will be better off. I care about closing those income inequities. Nothing is more American than that.
The question that I would ask for folks is, in the end, one of these people is going to be shaping policy. Do you like the policies that you've had for the last 4 years or not?